All right, man, welcome to the God Center Men's Recovery Show. I'm your host, Tim Holloway, and I'm glad to be back at you again. Look, if you're new here, this is a show dedicated to Christian men inside of recovery who want to live an awesome spirit-filled life. So if that is you, you stumbled on the right place. So this is lesson 4 inside of understanding the world and the world systems and how we have overcome the world. And so what I want to go into is just very briefly for about a minute or so, is to say where we are up to this point. Number 1, the world is the kingdom of man. We gave a clear definition of what the world is, and the world system is the kingdom of man. It is this world order and its system and its structures. And it has within it science, law, education, politics, entertainment, news, government, and religion. So that is the definition of the world and its systems. Number 2, the world is under an evil influence and is subject to disintegration, and that is that things are steadily declining and getting worse and not better. Number 3, there is a God of this world, and he has an agenda, and he blinds minds. And that goes into number 4, that the Antichrist, or that which is in opposition to Christian values, is already inside the world and every single one of its systems. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's religion, science, education, all of it. The mindset and the belief systems that oppose Christian values are already present in all of these areas. The enemy's number 1 tools is lies and deception. Okay, and this is really important because we think that our government is telling us the truth. We think that the systems in the government are telling us the truth, the education, the news, the media, and all these things, when in reality that is not the case. So it's lies and deception is the tactics. Number 6, the world and its systems cannot receive the spirit of truth, right? It is in opposition to any form of reality, fact, and truth. And so it's all about spinning. Now, number 7 is the world can't give you real peace. And what we talked about in the last episode was that all that is in the world is the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And these all come from the world. We talked about briefly how James said, you know what, if you're going to be a friend of this world, you're going to be an enemy of God. And he goes so far to say is to call those people adulterers. Adulterers is spiritual adultery. And that is thinking that you can have one foot in the world and one foot in with God, and think that you're lukewarm and balancing the fence and thinking that it's going to be well for you. That's just not the case. And so that was last week's. So starting out this, in Ephesians 2:2. It says this, where in times past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. And that is Ephesians 2:2. So what I want to point out here is times past we walked according to the traditions. We walked according to the patterns of the world. And that is the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, pride of life, and all that stuff we were thoroughly engaged and involved in. It was our mode of operation. It was our lifestyle. It came to us very naturally. The Bible calls this the carnal mind. Okay, and the carnal mind, the Bible says, is an enemy of God, or is an enmity with God. It is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. And so this carnal mind, I want to thoroughly explain what this is, and that is the part of our brain that goes to animalistic impulses, and that is fear-based inside of its nature, and that is not subject to the law of God. In fact, it is where insecurity, fear, and animalistic impulses come from. This is the carnal mind. This is the condition of the mind of man who is unregenerate, or hasn't been awoke or awake or been born again. Okay? And so this carnal mind has its appetites. And this is where addictions come in. This is where lust come in. That the carnal nature or carnality has its desires, and its desires is for fulfillment and for satisfaction. And that is that the pleasures that this carnal mind has, once fulfilled, It wants fulfillment and satisfaction of those carnal desires. And so this is just the state of all men that are born into this world, that they have a desire and they have a carnality, that they lust and desire for things, and they go about how to achieve those things. This is where the lust for power, position, authority, and all these different things come into play. This is all the pride of life. The pride of life is all about status, recognition, power, wealth, looking well to other people, and all these different things. It's all from carnality and the world and its systems. So we once walked in that. That was understanding that the old life, before we decided to follow God, was centered around this. And basically what happened was the carnality, or the flesh, if you will, was enthroned. And that is whatever you want, whatever you thought, whatever you feel, the self life. Okay? This is where self-will comes from. This is where self-deification comes from. This is declaring yourself as God. This is where self-medication, everything that you could think of that springs from the center of the self and the flesh and carnality, was manifested in our lives, and all this self-will and all this different stuff that used to take place. Something changed. Something happened. And what happened is that we became spiritually alive. And now that there's a battle for the throne room, before there wasn't no battle. Self was allowed to rule and reign and run rampant, and it was enthroned, and it was encouraged, and it was fed, and everything was fine. But now that we have entered into a battle, the battle against the flesh and the spirit, now that the spirit has been awoken and the spirit has become alive, now there is an opposition to the throne room. And that is that, are we going to be governed by self-will, or are we going to be governed by the will of God? Are we going to be governed by our selfish desires, or are we going to be governed by His desires? You see? So now that there is a conflict for the throne room. And so it's up to us to begin to understand that this battle is now taking place. And it's taking place because you become spiritually alive, and now the real battle begins to happen. Now we have to decide which voice we're going to listen to. Which impulse are we going to suppress? Which impulse are we going to encourage and to foster? And this is where immaturity comes in. And that is, many people have come to this walk of faith, and they think that it's going to be somehow easy, and that God is going to snap His fingers in health, wealth, and prosperity, and all these different things. And they don't understand that you have just stepped into the battle of the century, where before there was no conflict whatsoever. You are in total alignment with your selfish will and your selfish desires and everything that represents the enemy. I want you to understand this, is that sin started in the heart of the enemy. And he thought to himself and said, you know what, I think I will extend my throne. I think I will sit on the congregation of the north. I think I will be like the Most High. And so what we see in the very heart of the enemy is this selfish ambition to rise, and this self-will to enthrone self and to deify self, to be the king, right? And so that is the very principle and the nature that we're all born into. And it's only coming to recognize that you have been spiritually alive, and that now that you are awoke, if you will, that now is the time to look at those selfish desires and call them out for what they are. And not only that, but begin to suppress them. And that is that we are no longer going to feed those. And that is, I'm not going to yield my body any longer to be an instrument for unrighteousness. And that is the impulsiveness of the sinful nature and the desires that it has. I'm going to begin to recognize what it is and what is taking place and say, you know what? I'm going to resist that. You see, part of overcoming the world is understanding that you have to take a stance of active resistance. And that is that you're going to have to stand up, and you are going to have to resist. You're going to have to call it out for what it is, and that is a desire and an impulse that is contrary to the will of God for my life, and that it's not going to lead me to anywhere good. So I recognize exactly what it is, and I'm going to resist this impulse, and this impulse is not going to master me, but I am going to master it. Now, this is the responsibility of man, especially a man who has become awoke, right? And that you have the Spirit of God operating in your life. You hear Him speaking. You have this connection. And then now comes the responsibility to say, you know what? I am going to yield my body, my mouth, my mind as an instrument of righteousness to God. And that in turn is going to come to a denial of self. And what we do is we say, you know what? We deny self to reign. That we're not going to allow our selfish ambitions and our selfish desires trump the will of God for our life. And that we are going to be submissive to Him. That is a powerful, powerful reality. So, we once walked, listen to this, we once walked according to the course of the world. Now, the world is on a course, I tell you what, on a collision course. The world is on a course of disintegration and getting worse. And so we once walked according to the pattern and according to the customs of the world and its systems. And Paul goes even a step farther, even according to the prince of the power of the air. And that is the entity that is in direct opposition to the Spirit of God inside of our life. We once walked according to the pattern of the world and to the pattern of the Spirit that now works in all the children who are disobedient to God. Okay? So what does walked mean? This is a code of conduct. Our code of conduct was fashioned according to the world and its systems. Our manner of life, the way that we live and the actions that we act out were according to the patterns and the custom of this world. And we followed the world and its systems, and our minds and our hearts were totally occupied with the world, its structure, and its system, and its teachings. If you don't think the world has a teaching, you're crazy. Okay? The world has a pattern and a belief system, a paradigm for you to accept. And that is that it's going to affect your behavior if you believe that system and that paradigm. Okay? And so we once conducted our life in the manner of this world and this world system. But God has called us out of the world. Out of the world and out of its systems. To be part of a new kingdom. The kingdom that will manifest in a future date. And He will begin to rule and reign upon this world, and we shall rule and reign with Him. And then this is really the kingdom gospel. But it's definitely a day that's coming soon. So we once walked, Paul says, or actually Peter says this, whereby there is given unto us exceeding great and precious promises. That by these what? Promises. We might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. And so here's the reality about the world and the world systems, is that the world is experiencing corruption. And once again, corruption is just a disintegration. It is a thought of being marred from the original intent and disintegrating backwards into a very detrimental fashion. Okay, so the world and its systems are all experiencing corruption. And the corruption comes because of the strong desires, the lust of powerful men. Okay? Now, the end times and the scenario of Christ returning back is returning back because to stop the agenda. Because if it's allowed to continue and to go on with unchecked without any interference or interruption, then there's going to be no flesh saved. Okay? And so He's coming back to exact justice and to set up a kingdom. And if He doesn't, then we are all pretty much out of luck. And so that is the disintegration process that the world is coming to, that it's coming to very weak and coming to nothing because of the powerful desires of man and their lust for ambition, their greed, and their desire for power and authority and status and privilege and all of those things. Okay? So we escape the corruption. That's what Peter is talking about here. We talk about being saved, and we think of it as, one day I'm going to go to heaven. Now, well, that's true, right? One day you will go to heaven, but one day heaven's going to come on this earth and begin to rule and reign, okay? And so, but the reality is that we escape the corruption. Salvation is not about just going to heaven. Connection, relationship with God is not a pie in the sky that you can just, achieve, and that you're going to grab your harp and you're going to just sing songs for eternity. We have these different views and these mindsets of what it really is. But the reality of what it is that it is escaping the corruption. And what it is that the people of God who have the light, that is the revelation from God, and they're open to the Spirit of God and the voice of God, will continue to shine. In fact, we will shine brighter and brighter to the more perfect day. And though deep darkness cover the people and deep darkness the land, God will cause His light to shine upon us. And so what this world is undergoing is a process of deterioration, and that is integrity and character, and all of these things are going into a downward spiral and are disintegrating little by little. Systems and governments and everything is eroding little by little. But the character of the people of God, of us, is getting stronger and stronger, and His revelation is coming more and more and more abundant. So here's what we can expect, in the future. I'm no prophet, but I'm going to offer you a biblical interpretation of what to expect. The world and its systems, even the church and the false church that is in bed with the systems, is going to disintegrate along with the world. Okay, and as evil men wax worse and worse, so it is for the people of God that the light shines and the revelation comes more and more and more and more. And that's just a really, really powerful reality. So, partakers of the divine nature. Now, I want to thoroughly explain what this is, but to be a sharer. Now, to partake of something means you get to be a participant. It means you get to experience, you begin to occupy that, or you begin to enjoy it with others or have it in common with other people, okay? And that is, there is a certain portion or allotted to you. So partakers, to participate inside of the divine nature. Now, this is what we have all been offered. This is not something that's talked about very much, but we have been called to share and to partake in the divine nature, and that is the godlike qualities and the divinity, and most of all, the Zoe life, or the life, or quality of life that God possesses, that He gives to us. And that is that we can walk in joy, we can walk in fulfillment, we can walk in integrity, even though there's nothing to be joyful about. Even though everybody else is falling around us, we can stand and we can walk in integrity. And that is a powerful, powerful reality. But all of this comes about by planting the seed. And that is the way life starts. The Bible talks about it as the message of God being like a seed. Okay? And it's implanted into the hearts of people. And that seed needs to germinate, it needs to be fed, it needs to be nurtured, and it needs to be recognized, and all of these different things. But the seed takes germination, and it takes root, and the only thing for that life to do is to expand. The very nature and the very life that God has implanted in us is meant for growth and expansion. And so that's what begins to happen as we begin to believe certain truths. those very core truths, very fundamental truths, begin to take root, and they begin to grow and expand inside of our hearts, inside of our lives. And one of the greatest truths we can begin to accept is that of responsibility. And that is that we are responsible for our actions and for our behaviors. And not only that, that we can choose our response at any given circumstance. Now you take that belief with the belief that God is there for His Spirit to empower us, and that is to operate in and through us and to energize us. So you take those two things, that I'm going to be responsible, not only that, that I'm going to be energized and influenced by the power of the Spirit, and you got two humongous beliefs. When they're brought to fruition and when they grow and when they expand, we understand that we begin to take responsibility, we begin to rise in our authority, and we begin to understand that we have the Spirit of God operating in and through us in a very mighty fashion. And all of a sudden, character and integrity and all these things begin to build into a powerful life. So, we are partakers of the divine nature. Now we have escaped the corruption that is in this world. And what that means is that we are going to break free from, that we get to escape, break free from, and to get rid of. Okay? And this is the break free from the world and its systems, but also the decay. So this decay, I want to give you a definition so you can begin to understand exactly what this is. But it means to decline in health. Once again, this is the world and its systems, and everything that is taking place inside of the world is declining in health, and declining in strength, declining in vigor, to decrease in size, okay, and quantity, activity, and force. This is all symbolic of the decay of what is taking place inside of the world. So a corruption is a departure from the original form, okay? And that is like if let's take America, for example, and the Constitution and the way the government and the systems were set up. Now, a disintegration would be to depart from the original form, and that would be that free speech is no longer, free speech is changing, religious liberty is changing, and right to bear arms, and all these things are different changing. This would be a disintegration from the original. Now, I just use that example, but of course it is taking place inside the world and its systems. But more so, I'm talking about the spiritual life and the quality of life that God has for us, and the connection and the peace and the righteousness and the integrity and all of this stuff being yielded to the Spirit of God, disintegrated into something very hateful. The Bible says this, that all men will know that we are His disciples by the love that we have for one another. Not our politics, not all the policies that we stand for, not our religious affiliation, not our politics that are in bed with the world and its systems, but our love for even our enemies. Now, that is the true example and the true display of the reality of those who are His. So moving on. In Romans 12:2, it says this, and be not conformed to this world, but be transformed. Now, conformity is us taking after the same shape of something. It is looking at the outline and fashioning yourself out of that outline. And it also means to bring into harmony and accord. So this, Paul is saying here, don't be conformed. That is, don't be fashioned alike. Don't shape your life like that. Don't bring yourself into harmony with what is taking place in the world and its systems. And don't find yourself in one or agreement with the world and its systems. Okay, don't be conformed. Now, non-conformity is going to leave you on the minority, okay? Because the way the world works is that it rewards the majority for compliance, okay? There's not any world system that rewards you for non-conformity, right? You don't go to work one day and begin to disobey the boss and begin to come in unconformity to the standards of your business and think that it's going to be well with you. Okay, that's just not reality. And so with this non-conformity is a spirit of resistance. And that is that I'm not going to come in alignment with that, with the world and with its systems. Therefore, I'm going to be a nonconformist. I'm going to find myself in the minority. And that is that you will be hated by all nations for his namesake. And that is that we will come to be the most hated people. Now, during this time, we must understand that we can't respond in the same manner. Okay, we can't overcome hate with more hate. Okay, people are going to know that we're disciples by the love that we have for one another, and that is, though we are persecuted, we still maintain posture. Though people come against us, we still maintain peace. Okay, this is going to be different. And though we are in a storm that is taking place upon the world and all its systems, we are going to remain calm in the storm. And that is that we're not going to allow the storm to fear us. We're not going to allow this storm to cause us to begin to be depressed. We're not going to allow this storm to get us to operate in insecurity. There's going to be a lot of great things that begin to happen on this world, that their sole purpose is to instill fear. Whenever fear is present, you can guarantee that you are being manipulated to a certain action. It's the truth. And so whoever is the instiller of fear is trying to manipulate you into a behavior that is going to benefit them. Okay? And so that's why it's really important to understand that we are not going to be the ones who are governed by fear. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be concerned about some things. We definitely should be concerned. But the spirit of fear is come to manipulate you to a certain action and behavior. And we have to ask ourselves, am I going to be governed by fear? Am I going to be governed by the voice of the Spirit of God? So don't conform. This is going to leave you inside of the minority. So, with this non-conforming is the admonition to be transformed. Now, non-conformity is not enough. There's plenty of people who rise up in resistance and say they're not going to conform, okay? And they're rebels. And that is not alone what I'm talking about here, because you can be a nonconformist and still be in a lot of trouble, right? So this nonconformity needs to lead to being transformed up here by the renewing of our minds. And that is, we begin to understand thoroughly God's paradigm, his narrative, what he thinks about a certain situation, and his perspective. Because daily we are being bombarded inside of our eyes, our ears, and everything that is going on in the world for us to adopt a perspective. This side, that side, this side, that side. Everybody is offering you a perspective and a point of view of which they want you to accept. Okay? But contrary to all those views and all those opinions and all those paradigms, there is another view and opinion. And that view and opinion comes from the Word of God and the perspective of God and the paradigm that he offers us. Okay? And so inside the pages, inside the word is a narrative. And the narrative is this: that all men are in a state of sin. And that is that they have been marred, and that we are not keeping up with the original intent. And the original intent was a relationship and connection, walking with God in the cool of the day, right? The original intent was that. So we are not in the original intent, and we fall short of that original purpose. And understand the condition of the world is in this whole entire state of being marred. Now we can recognize that and say, woe is me, I'm undone. I am a sinner and I fall short of the glory of God. And I want to get in connection with God and begin to get better and better and grow and expand. Or I can do the direct opposite, begin to disintegrate and fall apart. The choice is ours. And so look at the areas of your life. Look at the areas where you're conforming to the world and its system, whether it's addictions or pornographies and all of these different things that take place inside of the world. Where are you conforming? That is, where are you giving in? Where are you releasing your authority? And then ask yourself, are you going to rise up and stand in resistance to those things? And begin to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that we can begin to hear and listen to God's narrative and believe His story. Within those pages of the Bible is God's story and God's narrative. And it is in direct contradiction to what is taking place inside the world and its systems today. Okay? And so we have to decide, are we going to find out what God's story is? What is His narrative? What does He think about this? So starting in this next episode, we were going to talk about to overcome the world. This is our calling. This is our destiny, to overcome the world and its systems, to rise up in direct contradiction and rebellion and be empowered by the Spirit of God inside of that. That is a powerful reality, brothers. All right. Talk to you later. Peace.